Socialized applications provide the users with the possibility of changing their behavior through interventions. Users can therefore set up timers to be notified when they are using the phone or a specific app for too long. They can set up blockers to block the usage of the entire phone or of a given app. And there are also some other less popular interventions that range from the possibility of comparing statistics with other users to the usage of motivational quotes and rewards. So after the functionality study, we performed a thematic analysis on more than 1,000 user reviews left by users for the 42 apps retrieved in the first study. In the analysis, we tried to understand why users like or dislike applications for changing their behavior with smartphones. And the first reason why users like these applications is because they are useful for different use cases. So, for example, they are useful for situations requiring constant user attention, like studying and working, because they allow users to avoid distractions, like notifications and self-interruption to, for example, check social networks. Surprisingly, users also adopt such applications for use cases that are not the primary focus of these tools. An example is sleeping. According to some users, monitoring their smartphone usage is a convenient way of understanding their sleeping patterns. Users also perceive digital well-being tools as helpful for controlling unhealthy behaviors. So on the one hand, visualizing how much time users spend on smartphones can be shocking. But on the other hand, this information helps users to reconsider their actions and to spend more time on other productive tasks, such as studying and working. And in the light of these benefits, users hope that the new behaviors they started to adopt will continue even without the help of the tool. In other words, users would like to learn how to behave, thus maintaining a more conscious use of the smartphone in the long term. Unfortunately, contemporary digital well-being tools focus on self-monitoring techniques and are not designed for this purpose, and we can reasonably say that this hope cannot be satisfied. Moreover, even the analyzed self-monitoring solutions are perceived as problematic, firstly because they are often not restrictive enough and can be easily bypassed. So interventions like timers and blockers, for example, can always be ignored, and digital well-being applications can be easily uninstalled. So even with a constant monitoring process, users may find it difficult to establish new behaviors for using the smartphone more consciously. Users are therefore forced to use creative solutions to overcome such issues, like using their wives for setting up secret passwords. And so, as a consequence, despite some short-term benefits, users need a lot of willpower to continue to use these tools. So it seems that contemporary digital well-being tools cannot be used to effectively change behavior in the long term, and even the same users recognize in their reviews that the failure of these apps lies in the lack of different functionality. Users, for example, suggest smarter and automatic interventions that detect the user activity, for example. And they also suggest the possibility of interacting with other users, for example, to compare statistics. So, with the first two qualitative studies, we explored functionality and reviews, and we highlighted potential benefits and drawbacks of digital well-being solutions. To further understand, in a more quantitative way, how contemporary digital well-being apps work, we devised a third, final study to be conducted in the wild. And our goal was not to explore new solutions, but to evaluate the existing ones. So for this purpose, we designed our own application named Socialize by implementing the most common features identified in our first study. So Socialize allows users to track and visualize their smartphone usage data. And the upper part of the app shows information related to the usage of the phone in general, the total time spent with the phone, the number of unlocks, and so on. Then in the bottom part, there is a list with some specific information for each used application. The user can click both on phone level or app level details to access a more detailed view of the data, to visualize different types of charts. And finally, as a widget recap, Socialize constantly shows a notification that displays some basic information. For what concerns interventions, with Socialize, users can set up different interventions. At phone level, they can set up timers by specifying a duration. They can also restrict the intervention for a given context only by specifying an activity and a location. In a similar way, they can set up phone blockers to block the usage of the phone in a given context. And users can do the same for each specific application. For example, here I set up a timer for YouTube of 1 minute, and now when I'm using YouTube and the timer expires, I'm notified with a pop-up, and they have the possibility of closing the app or ignoring the intervention. We tested Socialize in the wild by recruiting 39 participants, and we set up a within-subject experiment. The experiment lasted 3 weeks for each participant. In the first week, the collection phase, Socialize ran in the background and silently logged usage data. And then in the following 2 weeks, the intervention phase, participants could use all the functionality offered by Socialize, so they could analyze statistics, setting up timers, blockers, and so on. During the study, we measured day by day different metrics. First of all, we measured the daily usage time of the smartphone, and we noticed that, on average, participants spent less time with their smartphone during the intervention phase. Despite such a positive effect, Socialize didn't influence other metrics. Here the chart shows for each day the number of time participants unlocked their smartphones. And in this case, on average, participants didn't change their behavior. They consistently unlocked their phone both in the collection and in the intervention phase. Also, other metrics confirm that apps like Socialize are useful in some use cases, but they fail in other situations. For example, participants who use Socialize reduced the time spent on social networks in the intervention phase, but unfortunately this is not true for other types of applications such as messaging apps. Moreover, even with the help of Socialize, participants continued to use their smartphone very frequently, with many phone sessions at a distance of less than a minute. So participants continued to demonstrate a, let's say, compulsive checking behavior even when using Socialize. So let's summarize the findings we retrieved thanks to our 3 studies. We found that contemporary apps for changing smartphone behavior are useful for some specific use cases, but they fail in other situations. The same users are often aware that such solutions are sometimes not sufficient and that they need a lot of willpower to continue to use these tools. And this could be due to the fact that these applications focus by construction on self-monitoring techniques. While self-tracking plays an important role in the behavior change process, it doesn't support the formation of new habits, and it strongly depends on the monitoring behavior. So once the monitoring process stops, for example, because the user gets bored, the behavior can revert to pre-interventions levels. So the digital well-being application we analyzed are designed for breaking existing habits rather than developing new behaviors. Breaking habits, however, is frustrating, and users need to be continuously motivated to keep on the monitoring process. Moreover, such tools are often perceived as bypassable and not restrictive enough. And even in the wild study of Socialize, for example, participants ignored the majority of the interventions they defined. So at the end, we can conclude that contemporary digital well-being applications are not grounded in habit formation nor social support literature. And we claim that besides focusing on self-monitoring, researchers should also take advantage of the habit formation literature. Habit formation could play an important role in digital well-being applications by supporting behavior change and ensuring its long-term effect. One could envision, for example, the usage of goals and trigger events, because new behaviors linked with some specific routine are in fact generally easier to remember, and each repetition reinforces that association. So this increases the probability of repeating the behavior in the future. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I'm open to questions.
I encourage more people to ask questions.
Hi. So you found some interesting sort of differences in the third part of your study about what differences between like amount of time spent on the phone versus the number of unlocks. You saw differences in one but not the other, but then also differences in how what type of apps people are using. So you saw less time spent on messaging apps and less time spent on social network apps and so on and so forth. So I was just kind of curious, what do you think explains some of those differences? Why does this intervention have different effects on different behaviors?
Yeah, I think that first of all, there are different behaviors. So maybe the usage of a messaging app, it's not a bad behavior, for example, because I have to answer a message. So and so we are also trying to, in our current work, to develop new tools to understand bad and good behaviors with the phone. And so, yes, I think that timers are particularly useful for the usage of social networks, for example, because when you are browsing Facebook for, let's say, 15 minutes and the timer remembers you that you have spent too time on Facebook. So, yes, for this type of applications, timers are useful, and in fact, the results are tell us this story.
So very interesting work you did there. I'm wondering whether looking through the reviews of the different digital well-being apps, whether there were some features that came out as consistently viewed by users as being the most important ones, or the ones that they turn to as being the most influential in their behavior. And with regard to the bypass issue, did you encounter any sentiment from users that if the Wellbeing app was in fact non-bypassable, they would be more or less inclined to make use of it?
Yeah, so regarding the bypassable question, no, it's not bypassable, the question, but...
you must answer the question.
Yeah, so actually we found many users that would like to have more restrictive solutions, but I agree that when the solution is restrictive, we need to test it, because we don't know if the user will accept a restrictive solution. And I don't remember the first question.
Whether there were certain characteristics that users were.
Yeah, you can find more detail in the paper, but I think that the interesting findings is that users suggest new features. For example, comparing statistics, and so timers are not so appreciated by users, and also blockers, because they explicitly say that they need to be continuously motivated in using a timer. So I think that, but you could read more detail in the paper. Thank you.
We have time for one quick question, and I know people are waiting on the other side too. But please ask the questions after the end of the session as well.
Hello. So the tool you built had a bunch of different functionality.
Yes.
Which of that functionality did people actually engage with? And how did people feel about the app? So did you interview them as well about how they?
No, we didn't interview them after the usage of the app. So users used a lot of interventions, but they deleted them after a few times. So this is another interesting finding that confirms that such solutions are bypassable. I mean, users defined the intervention, but then when the timer expires, they deleted the timer. So this was the main behavior of the users in the study.
Let's thank the speaker.